Number 5. Find the domain of the function g of x is equal to x divided by the square root of x plus 8. Okay, so to find the domain, we have to consider the restrictions on x, since the domain is the set of all possible x values. So just like the last problem, we'll start by noting that the domain of the polynomial x squared is equal to all real numbers, because x can be any real value, and that's for any polynomial. Now for the expression 1 over x, the domain is all real numbers except for 0. And that's because if we have a rational function, the denominator cannot be equal to 0. If the denominator were equal to 0, then the function would be undefined. Now for the square root of x, the domain is all real non-negative numbers. X must be greater than or equal to 0 because we cannot have a negative number for the radicand of a square root. Now for our function, we see we have a rational function. So let's start by stating that our denominator cannot be equal to 0. But we also see that we have a square root in the denominator. So let's also state that the radicand of that square root, x plus 8, must be greater than or equal to 0. So just like last time, we can solve these two expressions for x to determine our domain. So let's start with the first expression. We're going to take the square of both sides to get rid of the square root. And we have x plus 8 is equal to, cannot be equal to 0 squared. Then we'll subtract 8 from both sides. And we see that x cannot be equal to negative 8. Now for the other one, this is a linear expression. So we know that x plus 8 is greater than or equal to 0 whenever x is greater than or equal to negative 8. Okay? Now that we have those two expressions, we want to express our domain in interval notation, and it helps to graph those expressions on a real number line that goes from negative infinity to infinity. So let's start by graphing the first one. To graph x cannot be equal to negative 8. We'll just plot negative 8 with an open circle because x cannot be included in our domain. Now for x is greater than or equal to negative 8, that's going to change to x is greater than negative 8 because we've already determined that x cannot be equal to 8. So for x is greater than negative 8, we just shade everything that's greater than negative 8. And from there we can see that our domain lies on the open interval from negative 8 to infinity.